All right, it's 7 o'clock. Should we get started?
Mhm.
All right. Let's see. Can everybody see me?
Yep.
Great. Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. My name is Zach Snyder. I'm a program manager at Solar Oregon, and I'll be your host for tonight's webinar on the very exciting topic of heat pump water heaters. This is a new green technology that many homeowners are adopting. It's great for the climate and also for your pocketbook. So I'm excited to dive into this topic with you all. I hope that everybody is staying healthy and happily self-isolated. I've been taking nice little neighborhood walks, which I highly recommend. I've also decided that I'm not going to shave until the governor lifts the self-isolation order. Hashtag no shave corona. Joe and I are used to giving presentations to rooms full of people we can see. We can't see you guys tonight, but you all get a nice little window into our bedrooms and living rooms. This is Solar Oregon's first webinar, which we're really excited about, especially since we had over 140 RSVPs. So that's great. I think we are going to have a lot of people joining us just in the next minute here. It is, though, our first webinar, so we are still learning, so forgive any small technical hiccups. As a nonprofit with an educational mission, we are shifting a lot of our upcoming events to webinar, and I hope you can join us for all of them. A couple upcoming ones are Solar plus EVs on April 14th. So if you want to learn about the combination of solar plus electric vehicles, that's a great time to tune in. We're also going to have a really exciting Earth Day Go Solar webinar on April 22nd on Earth Day, just for you guys. So if you want to learn more about those, you can go to www.solaroregon.org. I am going to jump into my slides again now. Here we go. Can you guys see my slides? Great. So we've got three great guests tonight to talk about heat pump water heaters. The first one is Joe Wachunas of our very own Solar Oregon. And he's going to give a great overview of heat pump water heaters and also his personal story because he owns two of them. After that, we are going to shift to Gregor Morrison from Energy Trust of Oregon. And he's going to lead us through a little bit about the different models available and rebates available to help you afford these already very cost-effective appliances. And finally, we'll be joined by Alexi Miller from New Buildings Institute. And he'll be talking a little bit about heat pump water heaters and net zero. So zooming out a little bit and looking at how heat pump water heaters really help us reduce our overall carbon emissions as a society. Each presenter will be speaking for roughly 10 minutes with a 5-minute Q&A after each speaker. That 5-minute Q&A is just for brief clarifying questions. And any longer questions, I'm going to hold until the end. We're going to have a longer 30-minute Q&A session. And if you're not familiar with how to ask questions over a webinar, don't worry about that. I'm going to show you guys in a little bit here. So a little bit about Solar Oregon. We're a nonprofit that's been around for over 40 years. And our mission is to educate about solar and other clean energy to communities in our state. One of our biggest programs is our Basics of Solar, and that's a workshop that we deliver all over the state to communities for a long time now. And it covers the basics of what is solar, what does installation entail, how do you find a good contractor, and what incentives are available. We also do a lot of solar tours. So we have solar home tours where folks in our community will invite others to come and take a look at their personal solar system and hear their story. We're going to be starting up solar agriculture tours, which have more of an agriculture farm kind of focus. And we also have a big solar winery tour every year. This year, it's on May 2nd, like usual, but We've had to postpone it because of COVID. And so we're going to have that in August. So you guys will all still get to take part in that. We also lead Solarize campaigns around the state. And a Solarize campaign is a way for a whole community to come together and go solar at the same time by taking advantage of a bulk buying discount through a contractor. And we also have a huge focus on peer-to-peer education because we think that telling our stories and how clean energy helps benefit our lives is the best way to spread clean energy. And that's part of what we're doing tonight. We're a member-driven organization, and we have hundreds of members around the state. A huge thanks to all of our members who are on the line right now. Your support helps all of our educational programming and makes all of it possible. If you're not a member and you would like to become one, you can do that in one of two ways. Joe, if you want to queue up the link in the chat, you guys can click the link directly from the chat. You can go to www.solaroregon.org and click join us and then click become a member. Or you can email us directly at info@solaroregon.org and just let us know that you want to be a member. It's $40 for a year, and you get discounted tickets to a lot of our events. You get to come to a special annual members only event that we put on once a year to celebrate our community. And you get to be part of a great community of clean energy enthusiasts. So if you're not a member, please join. And one more thing before we get started, I want to give you guys a little bit of a tutorial of the platform we're using so we can make it as interactive as possible. We would love to get as much feedback from you as we can. So we're using a platform for this webinar called Zoom. The first thing I want to show you is how to ask questions. So if you mouse down over your screen and you mouse toward the bottom, there should be a set of tools on a bar down there. And one of them will look like this, and it says Q&A. If you click that, it'll open up a text box, and you should be able to type in a question, and that's something that I will see as a host. As all our speakers are talking, I'll be monitoring all the incoming questions, and then I will read those out to the speakers for you. So feel free to ask your question at any time during the presentation. Another feature you can use, if you haven't already found it, is the chat button. And that looks like this icon of a speaking bubble. And if you click that, you can open up and type in a message. The message is either directed just to the panelists, and that's going to be myself, Joe, and Gregor here, or it will be directed to the panelists and all the attendees, and you can choose that. And it's just a great way to connect if you just want to make a little comment or something. The final way that we are going to be interacting with you today is through polls. So we are going to be asking you guys questions, and you'll have the opportunity to answer the question. It'll come up in a text dialogue that looks a little bit like this image on the screen here. This is just a random question. You'll be able to click your answer and then click the blue submit button. Your answer is not tied to your personal information, your name at all. It's not stored. It's just a way for us to get a sense of who our audience is generally. So it should be pretty fun. And now I am going to stop talking and get on to the great content that we're all here to hear tonight. I'm going to introduce Joe Wachunas. I'm going to switch over so Joe can start presenting. Joe is my coworker and friend and fellow program manager here at Solar Oregon. He leads up many of our core educational programs, as well as our Electrify Everything content, and is responsible for much of Solar Oregon's explosive growth over the past year and a half. He's also a program manager at Fourth Mobility, where he manages their downtown electric vehicle showcase. From your bedroom or your living room, please give a warm welcome to Joe Wachunas.
Thanks, everybody. I can hear you clapping from where you are. It's such a great pleasure to be here with you tonight, all of us stuck in home. Thanks for joining us in this difficult time. We're excited to be continuing the work of clean energy because we know that when this passes we'll be back at it trying to make our home and our world a cleaner place. So thank you for being here. As Zach mentioned, we do a lot of education primarily around solar energy, but solar doesn't exist in a vacuum. And so we like to talk about complementary technologies. And heat pump hot water heaters are a great case in point. And so I'm going to start sharing my screen and go to my slides here and get into it. Oh, excuse me, wrong slides here. There we go. So the heat pump hot water heaters are, like this slide says, awesome. They are what I consider the 21st century water heating technology that we need. And why does it matter? Well, water heating technology or water heating accounts for about 17% of an average home's energy use. So we are talking about, when we're talking about all the homes across our city, across the country, we're talking about a huge effect. And if we're able to heat our water cleanly, it would have an amazing effect on our communities and our world. So, and then water heating is also really related to solar energy. In the recent past, a lot of people would install solar thermal water heaters on their roof. And this is where there's a machine on your roof that collects the heat from the sun and heats up your water. And this was the green option until heat pump hot water heaters appeared. And now heat pump hot water heaters have become the default clean way to heat your energy. So I'll be talking a little bit about the water heating as it's existed up until the recent past, about 5 to 10 years ago when heat pump hot water heaters appeared, and what were our choices. And then we'll talk about heat pump hot water heaters, and we'll see how they're superior in a lot of ways to the past technologies. And then I'll be talking about the advantages of heat pump hot water heaters and my story and how I've installed 2 of them so far. So let's get going. Again, related to solar, there's my son. Let's start off with the heating conundrum. This is something I just made up, so feel free to use this great term. The heating conundrum is the idea that we need heat to live, and to make heat, we burn things, and that gives us this, this comfort. We can lay on our couch like this, or on our bed like this cat. But the byproduct of burning things is pollution, and we're in this conundrum. We need heat to live, but we pollute our planet to heat. And the heat pump hot water heaters help get us out of the conundrum, which is why it's super exciting. Let's do our tour de force of water heaters up to now. You've heard of this Fab 4. Well, have you heard of this Fab 4, the 4 water heating technologies that we've had before heat pump hot water heaters? We have gas hot water heaters, electric hot water heaters, instant hot water heaters, and solar hot water heaters. And we're going to take a real quick second to do our first poll. We want to see who in the audience has which type of hot water heater. So Zach, you can go ahead and start that poll, and then I'll get right back to my slides.
Great. I am launching the poll right now, so you should have that text dialog on your screen. The question is, what type of water heater do you have? And it's multiple choice. It's gas, electric, instant gas / electric, solar thermal, heat pump, I don't know, or nuclear. So go ahead, we're gonna give you 15 more seconds. It looks like we've already got a lot of responses here.
Great, and Zach, while they're working on that, Alexi is he's an attendee, if you could make him a participant.
Yeah, I am figuring that out right now.
Okay, perfect.
Great. I'm gonna end the poll here. We've got some interesting results here, and I'm gonna share the results so everybody should be able to see this data on your screen. What type of water heater do you have? We got 48% have gas, 29% have electric, 9% have instant gas or electric, 8% have solar thermal, just 9% have heat pump, and 3% aren't quite sure. 0% have nuclear, which is good to hear.
That was a little joke. Okay, so let's see how that stacks up with the with data for the Northwest. The number one most prevalent water heater is our electric hot water heaters. This data is from the Northwest Energy Efficiency Alliance, so thank you to them for this. Those make about 40% of our local market. These water heaters use electricity to heat this rod up in the water heater. They smush atoms together. This is my very scientific explanation. And that creates heat, but it's also in a pretty inefficient way. And it uses enough electricity, I've calculated, for my car to drive about 16,000 miles. So I could drive across the country 4 times with the amount of electricity used in 1 year in one of these water heaters. So that gives you an idea. Electricity is getting cleaner all the time, and we'll see that with heat pump hot water heaters, but the standard electric uses it pretty inefficiently. The next type of water heaters, the most prevalent in our poll, but 33% in our market, is natural gas. And natural gas has a couple problems. It, of course, is a fossil fuel and emits carbon dioxide. And the goal of Go Zero and getting our houses cleaner is to reduce our carbon emissions. It involves extracting it, involves getting it out of the ground, and that can be dirty processes like from fracking and such. And then when you burn the gas in a hot water heater, it's only 50 to 60% efficient. A lot of the energy then escapes up the vent, and so we're not talking about a very efficient use of energy. And then finally, gas hot water heaters are more dangerous in an earthquake, which is why this one is strapped. Moving right along, 15 to 20 years ago, as we're trying to search for our next generation of clean water heating technology, instant hot water heaters came onto the market. And right now it's 13% of the market is instant hot water heaters. And these are more efficient, of course, because they only heat water when it's needed, and that you don't store hot water in a tank all day for when you need it, just an hour a day or so. They're 25 to 35% more efficient and save energy that way, but most still use a fossil fuel. Most are natural gas based. And then finally, the solar hot water heaters. These were the goal and the dream, and we have a high percentage on our webinar that have solar hot water heaters. And so I'd be interested to hear your experience with them in the chat if you'd like. We've talking to solar installers. We've seen. Let me describe them first. Sorry, they have a machine that sits on your roof, and it collects heat from the sun, and then it sends that heat, usually in a refrigerant, to heat your water in a tank. And usually there's a backup tank for in the winter when you're not getting a lot of heat. Negative, so you have to have a backup system, usually electric or gas. And we've seen a lot of repairs. In talking to some installers, they say that this was the green option, and now they're advocating installing heat pump hot water heaters instead that can be paired with solar electric systems. So that's our tour of the Fab Four. But now let's talk about the new kid on the block that we're all here for tonight, the heat pump hot water heaters. Heat pump hot water heaters, first, actually, let's do another quick poll. We want to know what your experience is with heat pump hot water heaters to date. So a real quick, if you've seen them, go ahead, Zach, and launch that poll.
All right, I've launched this poll, so you should be able to submit your answer. The question is, what is your experience with heat pump water heaters? And the first answer is, you've never heard of them before tonight. The second one is, have heard of them, but never seen them. Third one is, have seen one before. Fourth choice is, you know someone who has one. And the last one is that you have one in your home. So let's give you 15 or 20 more seconds to respond. All right, it looks like we have got some static numbers now. So I'm ending the poll, and I'm going to share these results with you. 12% of our audience has never heard of heat pump water heaters before tonight. 31% have heard of them but never seen them. 31% have also seen one before. 18% know someone who has one, and 9% have one in their home.
Great. Fantastic. So let's just talk a little bit about how they work. And of course, I'm not a technical expert, so this will be a high level, and some of the other guests can, if you have any technical questions, can hopefully help with that, or we'll steer you in the right direction. But we'll just get a general idea of how heat pump water heaters work. Heat pumps are not new to our lives. Our lives have a refrigerator as a type of heat pump, or an air conditioner as a type of heat pump. Heat pumps just work in the opposite direction. Instead of producing cool air, they produce warm air, in this case, warm water. They work on the top of the heat pump hot water heater. There's an intake where it takes in warm air, and it takes the heat out of that air and heats the water with that heat. Even in air that feels cool to us, refrigerants can take heat out of that air and heat water. And because it's moving heat, essentially, it's moving heat from outside your water heater into the water heater, and it's not creating heat. That's where it gets its incredible efficiencies from. And the great thing about heat pump water heaters is that they only exhaust cold air. So you have an hot air intake and a cold air exhaust. And we'll talk about different ways that cold air is exhausted. One last thing about this diagram is that heat pump water heaters also have electric rods here, just like the electric water heaters we saw. So they're considered hybrids. They have both the heat pump technology, but then if you need an extra boost, if there's high demand, you can have the backup traditional electric technology. It's not as efficient, but you're actually guaranteed faster hot water creation. Where can heat pump water heaters be installed? Well, here's 3 places they can be installed. The basements work great. Mine are in my utility closets, and then garages as well. You can see in the garage and the basement, they are not ducted. They don't have any ducts coming out of them, but rather they take the heat from the air around them, and then they exhaust cold air into the air around them. So they will cool the space they're in by a couple of degrees. Because I have mine in my house, I have my heat pump water heater ducted, and it pulls air out of my attic and exhausts it back out through the attic and outside. This is not a picture of my heat pump water heater. You'll see mine is a little bit uglier than this, but this gives you an idea of the different places they can be installed. Heat pump water heaters have different modes of operation. This is really interesting. So you have options of keeping it on a heat pump mode, which is how I usually have mine. And that's exclusively on heat pump. It's heat pump technology. It's the most efficient way to heat water. It only uses the heat pump, doesn't use that backup electric. I have 3 showers running off of 1 water heater, a 50-gallon hot water heater, and we only have it in heat pump mode, and it's never a problem. But if you want, there's also energy saver mode. That's where it's mostly heat pump, and then it's got an electric backup so that electric kicks in if there's really high demand. Then there is the high demand mode. Sorry about that. That is both heat pump and electric going at the same time. It's not as efficient, but you'll heat water really quickly. And then finally, there is the all electric mode, where you would just run it like an electric hot water heater, but there's no reason to really do that one. So can you install it yourself, or should you call a professional? Well, I think if you're comfortable installing an electric heat pump, and this is my non-technical advice, if you're comfortable installing an electric heat pump or electric water heater, you'd be comfortable installing an electric heat pump water heater. They're really similar. Our friends at Northwest Energy Efficiency Alliance have created this PDF of installation tips, and Zach will put that in the chat room, as well as a video of how to install. And he'll put both in the chat. And Gregor will be talking a little bit more about getting a professional trade ally there to install your heat pump water heater. So let's talk about the advantages. Well, I said they were efficient, and this is how much more efficient. You can see the heat pump water heater is 3 times more efficient than your standard electric one. It's 6 times more efficient than your gas hot water heater, and even the instant or solar don't come close. So the efficiency is that it results from that moving heat rather than creating it, and it's just unbelievable. Advantage number 2 is that it uses electricity, and this has a huge carbon benefit. We've seen, this is the carbon emissions by electricity, and you see it's declining really rapidly. So anything that uses electricity has the potential to be very clean. And why is that? Because coal use has been cut in half in 10 years. and renewables have doubled in the last 10 years. And these trends are just accelerating and growing. So this is really positive and exciting. And then I should mention too, if you have your own solar panel system, when the sun is shining, your solar panel system would be powering your heat pump hot water heater, and that's really exciting. Right. The advantage number 3 is that they're also cost competitive. This is just something I pulled off online 2 days ago, $800 for a heat pump hot water heater, and Gregor will talk more about the incentives and tax credits you can get on heat pump hot water heaters. So the problem with solar thermal is that they could be really expensive. These are really cost comparable, even a little cheaper. And then to run them, they're incredibly cheap. So great. I see Alexi joined us. Good to see Alexi. So this is the energy guide for my heat pump hot water heater, and you see usually the ratings are the cost is from $177 to $506 to run your water heater for a year. Well, my water heater is off the charts so low. It's $110 to run my water heater for a year. So that gives you an idea of how, especially in these times where we're nervous about recession and such, these water heaters are incredibly efficient and cheap to run. Let me tell you a little bit about my story, and then I'll open it up for questions. This is my house. Those of you who've come to our events before have probably seen it a couple of times. I'm always blabbing on about my house. We have kind of a little triplex of a house. We added an addition in 2015 that we ran on Airbnb. We have a main house where my family of 4 lives, and then we have an ADU. All this to say that we have 7 people in my house and 2 water heaters and just a lot of demand. So I've tested my water heaters, and I can report how great they are. Now, I promised you that my picture did not look as good as that one earlier, but this is my water heater in my utility closet. Now, you can see it has these ducts. I use flexible ducts here, and it pulls water. The ducts have to be insulated. They pull water they pull hot air from the attic. So you can imagine the summer when the attic is really hot. That's great because the heat is just coming right from there. It uses that heat and then exhausts cold air out through the attic out of the house. I installed this first one in my main house in 2017. We had a 20-year-old gas water heater that was on its last legs, and we wanted to be able to install this. I had to do a lot of the research myself. I felt like there wasn't as good information as there is now. One of the things when I was doing research was, people were saying, oh, they're noisy. And so I was nervous about that. Not at all. It's about the same volume of noise as a fridge, and then it's in my utility closet, so I close it, and it's just really a non-issue at all. Again, we have 3 showers because we have that apartment that we rent on Airbnb that run off of this water heater, 6 people, and it's on heat pump mode all the time, which means it's really extra efficient. It replaced the gas water heater. Something to think about that's totally possible. I've done it twice now. I have a 240 volts of power there for the water heater to tap into. And so we had to run a line to be able to do that. And then we went and installed another heat pump hot water heater in our ADU, that garage apartment that we've changed into a living unit. And this was a picture from 2012. We had radiant floor heating in the apartment. And so our heat pump water heater runs not only our shower and dishwasher and all the hot water, but it also runs the heating system of the radiant floor. And it does it all on heat pump mode like a champ, unbelievably well, really efficiently. So these water heaters are extremely versatile, and I just want to shout on the rooftops how great they are. So this is why we're having this webinar. So that's my spiel. You can read more about it. We just published an article on Medium and in our newsletter. You can read more about that in depth, and Zach will put the link in the chat room. And I am ready to open it up for a couple questions.
My mute button is hidden underneath the Q&A button. Great. Well, that was awesome. Thank you so much, Joe. We've got a couple questions here. And just a reminder to folks that if you're trying to figure out how to ask a question, there should be a Q&A button on the bottom toolbar on your screen. Go ahead and open up that window, type in some questions, and we can go ahead and answer them. I've got 3 right now, 4 actually. Oh, 6, 7. I'm going to go ahead and ask one and then go ahead and take a look at the others. First question, Joe, is I think a simple question, so I'm going to ask it. Can I route the cold air inside for summer and hot air inside in winter?
And the cold air inside in summer, I've tried that before, and you can just instead of exhausting it out my house, you can create a system where you just open a vent and use that cold air. I tried it one summer. It wasn't as much cold air as I would have expected, and it wasn't cold air. Usually, you take a shower in the morning, and so you're using that cold air around 10 or something. So it wasn't like when I wanted it in the late afternoon. It wasn't a great amount of cold air for my family, but that was really appealing for me. As far as the hot air goes, you're always pulling hot air from somewhere, so you're never exhausting hot air. So you would never be able to use that. You always pull the hot air. So there's never a chance to use any sort of hot air.
Great. I have another one here that's very quick. What brand did you install?
Oh, great. Yeah. So I did the Ream Performance brand, and Gregor is going to be talking a little bit more about different types of brands that there are. That's available at a lot of hardware stores. It's at Home Depot and I believe Lowe's as well.
Great. I'm reading through, we've got 17 questions, and a lot of them are, I think, maybe not quite as brief as we're looking for right now in this short Q&A, but we'll get back to them in the longer Q&A. And model. Yeah, we've got a lot of great questions. And not many of these are clarifying questions, so I'm just going to ask a couple more, and then we can move on to the next speaker, and we'll work our way through all of these questions in the final Q&A. The next question here is, how does this work in a house that might also have a heat pump for heating and cooling? I'm assuming they are compatible.
Yeah, I've got a heat pump, a ductless heat pump that runs my heating and cooling for my main house. It's a separate system, so it's all a tank system. Some of the other guests can talk to you about separated system where yes, but yeah, they're separate systems, and they work great, especially if you have your heat pump or water heater in an unconditioned space like your garage or your basement, or if you duct it in your main house. They work great and allow you to have that all electric house that you can add solar to and really get to close to zero.
Awesome. I'm going to ask just 2 more here, and then we're going to leave the remaining 15 for the final Q&A. Sorry to anybody who's left waiting. The next question here is, what is the lifespan of a heat pump water heater?
I'll probably let Gregor or Alexi answer that if they know. And if not, we can.
Yeah, this is Alexi. I've seen estimates from 10 to 15 years. I think Energy Star says 13. It varies based on who, but it's similar to a regular water heater. You know, some units just keep on going like a tank and some don't, but they're newer, right? So there are not 40-year-old heat pump hot water heaters, and there still are a couple of ancient electric ones. So 10, 15 years is reasonable.
Great. And this is a little bit of a curveball, technically, but maybe one of our panelists knows. We already have solar thermal. Can we team it up with a heat pump water heater? So that's a system that you're using solar thermal to heat your water. And the question is, can you also use a heat pump water heater in conjunction with that system?
I'm not sure if you can. I don't know how the solar water heaters have just a normal electric water heater backup. And if it has a standard backup that's just like a regular water heater, yeah, I don't see why you couldn't. but I think if Alexi or Gregor knows, if not, we can point you in the right direction of a contractor to answer that one.
Great. All right. I'm going to hold the rest of these open questions to the end of the Q&A, but thanks so much, Joe, for all this great information. I am now going to introduce our second panelist, Gregor Morrison. Gregor is an account manager for Energy Trust of Oregon residential program. He helps customers and contractors in the Portland Metro and Southwest Washington region get access to cashback, information and tools they need to complete energy-saving home upgrades. Prior to working on this program, Gregor worked across the public and private sector on sustainability and energy initiatives. Go ahead and give a silent clap for Gregor Morrison.
Thank you, Zach. Thank you for the introduction there, Zach. Everyone hear me okay? Perfect. Well, good evening to you all. My name is Gregor, like Zach said, and I work on behalf of Energy Trust residential program in the Portland Metro and Southwest Washington region. I'll just echo what the lads said before. Thanks for making the time this evening to join us for this webinar and for wanting to find out more about heat pump water heaters. I do hope you and your families are all keeping safe and well during these unprecedented times. It's amazing how quickly things become the new normal, and that the way many of us are now currently operating in our work life and private life is solely through webinars or FaceTime and messaging. So I do apologize in advance if my 4-year-old son pops up in the background, or if you see a teddy bear bounce off my head, because during this presentation, it's bedtime. It's possible, it might happen. For my presentation, I'm going to cover current models of heat pump water heaters available in the market, the benefits of heat pump water heaters and why Energy Trust supports them, and of course Energy Trust incentives available for purchasing heat pump water heaters. Okay, I should put my clock on first of all, actually. Time myself, yeah.
Gregor, would you like us to start off with some polls?
Well, I'm gonna hold off on the poll question actually and get that part way through there.
Okay.
That's okay. Okay, so there are a variety of heat pump water heater manufacturers in the market. The most common brands, as Joe mentioned, the Rheem, A.O. Smith, and Bradford White. There are other brands available, of course. And with these, you can pick from 50, 65, and 80-gallon tanks, and to find the one that's right for your size home and for the number of people in your home. A full list of these systems can be found on the Energy Trust of Oregon website. This list is broken down into tiers. In addition to Energy Star requirements, NEA, the Northwest Energy Efficiency Alliance, has tested and rated heat pump water heater efficiency in our Northwest climate. So tier 1 products are in compliance with Energy Star and the basic requirements of Energy Star, and tier 2 and 3 offer additional features and a higher minimum energy factor. And this list on our website is listed as tier 1, 2, or 3. So what are the benefits of the heat pump water heater, and why does Energy Trust support and promote them? Well, as Joe mentioned, they use electricity to move heat from one place to another instead of generating the heat directly. Therefore, they can be up to 2 to 3 times more energy efficient than the conventional electric water heater. Most of these heat pump water heaters come with a minimum 10-year warranty. Water heating is the second largest home energy expense after heating and cooling. Around 20% of a home's energy is used to heat water. So you may be able to lower your utility bills with more of an efficient model, such as a heat pump water heater. The actual savings from installing the heat pump water heater will, of course, vary depending on your home's characteristics and your usage. But based on studies in our local market, heat pump water heaters can save up to $90 a person per year. Heat pump water heaters are one of the few upgrades you can make in your home that pays for itself in less than 10 years. And of course, like I mentioned, there's the Oregon Trust, Energy Trust of Oregon incentives. Heat pump water heaters, they're the only electric water heating solution to earn the Energy Star label. Heat pump water heaters are the most efficient electric option. They have, Joe mentioned it, they have these advanced controls like vacation mode that can save you energy and money when you're away. They also have select specific water temperatures, and you can choose different operating modes depending on the demand. Then they're becoming more popular. In 2019, there were 2,004 sold through retail. In 2017, our data tells us that 1,743 heat pump water heaters were installed with the help of Energy Trust trade allies and participating retailers. A fun fact is that that's enough energy saved to power 619 laps around Oregon in an electric car. So basically, overall, the message here is that it's a smart purchase option because they cut the amount of electricity used to heat your water and therefore save significant amounts of energy and money on your bills. And Energy Trust is working with retailers throughout the state to offer these instant discounts on the water heaters, which helps make your upgrade more affordable. Okay, so we're going to talk about the Energy Trust incentives available out there. But first of all, Zach, would you mind pulling up that first poll question?
Yeah. Let me grab it here. I'm going to launch this poll question. So the question is, have you applied for an Energy Trust incentive before? And this is a broad question. This is any Energy Trust incentive. And it's a yes or no question. You should have it up on your screen. Let's give you 20 more seconds to go ahead and vote on this. I see 0 voted so far. Let me check the chat.
Yeah, I don't think
it's not on the, nobody's getting it there. Okay, let me try this again. Sorry for that small glitch.
That's okay. I'm nervous. Who knows about Energy Trust, but hopefully that's not the case.
All right, I'm relaunching the poll. Go ahead and put in the chat if you don't see it, but it should be up on folks' screens. If not, we've got a little technical glitch here.
I think it's a technical glitch.
Technical glitch. That's too bad.
We can skip over that one for now, Zach. Hopefully, I was just wanting to get a sense of that the audience were aware of who Energy Trust were, and that you have been taking advantage of the rebates available through Energy Trust. But yeah, we can figure that out after their Zach.
I can try launching the second poll if you want to hear. Have you used a trade ally from Energy Trust Network before? Would that be great?
Sure. Well, I'll burn through this slide first, Zach, and then we can post that one if that's okay.
That's great.
So the incentives available through Energy Trust, if you want to go down the DIY route method of installation, there is a $500 instant discount for qualifying models available at a number of retailers, including what you see on your screen, the Home Depot, Lowe's, and George Moreland Plumbing. And on our website, there's a full list of participating retailers available. Just make sure that you call to these stores ahead of time to make sure that ensure availability. The heat pump water heaters, they're usually retail around $1,300 to $2,500, depending on the model that you're looking for. So that $500 is quite a significant discount there. It's very welcome. So Joe touched on it before. There is, well, firstly, make sure when you're taking on the challenge of installing it yourself that you follow the manufacturer's manual. But NEA, the Northwest Energy Efficiency Alliance, does have that self-install tip sheet, which is great. It's clear, it's simple, it's a step-by-step guide. It also shows you what tools and what equipment you should have prepared. And that's also found, that diagram that Joe showed on his screen, that's available on our website also. Oh, I don't want that in there. I was just trying to move the video off of me. If you do go down the route of a contractor, actually this would, Zach, sorry, this would be a good time to post this second poll question if it's working now. Can you hear me there, Zach?
Yeah, sorry, typing in that Q&A.
No problem.
All right, I'm gonna try to launch this second poll here. I'm launching right now, so hopefully this will show up on everybody's screen. The question is, have you used a trade ally from the Energy Trust Network before? And I'm getting lots of votes, so it looks like this one's working. And it's yes, no, or unsure. Let's give you 15 or 20 more seconds to go ahead and get all our votes in. All right, it looks like the numbers are not changing. So I'm closing out this poll and let's take a look. I'm gonna share the results with you guys. The question was, have you used a trade ally from the Energy Trust Network before? 43% said yes, 52% said no, and just one person wasn't sure.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. So maybe from that, I can take that 43% has maybe also taken advantage and taken that Energy Trust incentive in the past. Basically, the Energy Trust Trade Ally Network is just a network of contractors who have taken additional trainings through Energy Trust. It's a great opportunity for contractors because it helps them with customer referrals. They can often offer additional incentives that other contractors can't offer their customers. So it's good for their business and it's good for the customer as well. You can go onto Energy Trust and then you can basically type in your address where you are and it'll pop up with the nearest trade allies that specialize in whatever project that you're hoping to install. So it's a really good tool to use and I fully encourage you to check that out and take advantage of that. So if you do go down the route of contractor install your heat pump water heater, they through the Energy Trust, they go directly to the incentive goes directly to the installer in this case. If they go to certain distributors, these incentives start at $300 and that helps bring down the overall installation price. Final equipment pricing similar from distributor and the retailer, since distributors typically offer slightly lower prices to contractors than can be found in retail. If you are working with an installer, just be sure to ask them if they are purchasing from a participating distributor. In addition, Energy Trust offers an extra $270 incentive for customers who meet what we call the savings within reach income. And this is they have to fall into a specific income guideline to get this additional incentive. Savings, it's basically a program track that allows for these increased incentives for income qualified households. If you want more information, I'm happy to pass that on to you to see if you are eligible for that additional incentive or not. If you are eligible, you have to go through and sign an income verification form to confirm eligibility. But if you are eligible, you should be aware of this additional incentive because it's $270 on top of that. 300 is quite significant. And finally, additional incentives for heat pump water heaters are available for new home construction. So for those of you who may be purchasing a new home down the road, make sure to keep an eye out for homes that participate in the Energy Performance Score program. In order for a home to meet Energy Performance Score requirements, they must be rated to be at least 10% more efficient than a typical new built home. And heat pump water heaters help the energy efficiency rating of a new home, and therefore can save the homeowner money for the life of the system itself. On the screen is the energy performance scoring tool, and it highlights the benefits of energy efficient newly built homes, and it stands as a symbol for efficiency. The performance scoring rated home are built more efficient than typical non-energy performance homes, and each is thoroughly tested so you can be confident in how they'll perform. These EPS rated homes are built to save energy and include advanced framing and lighting, high performance windows and insulation, energy efficient appliances, heating and cooling equipment, and more, including being built solar ready. So just be aware of these additional incentive options for the heat pump water heaters and new home construction also. And that's, I'm gonna open up to a few Q&As. Zach.
Great. Thank you so much, Gregor, for all this great info. We have got 16 questions in the Q&A. So I'm just going to ask a couple here that seem a little bit shorter. One question here for you, Gregor, is does the $300 contractor incentive get passed through to the customer, or does it stay with the contractor?
With the contractor, but it comes off of the final invoice. So you see it, but the contractor gets paid by Energy Trust.
Great. I don't see a whole lot of clarifying questions, so I'll just throw one more here into the mix and see if any of you want to answer it. A question is, are there typically refrigerant-related maintenance costs, and how often is maintenance required / recommended?
That's a good question. I'm not sure how often maintenance is required. Maybe somebody else on the panel can talk to that. I know, like Alexi said, that these heat pump water heaters have about the same lifespan as regular electric water heaters, which is over 10 years. But of course, there may be some maintenance in between that, but I don't know exactly how much and when that would be likely to happen.
I will chime in with a grain of salt. I'm no expert. My understanding is that there's some recommended maintenance. Most of it is like with a regular, legacy water heater, right? An electric water heater, you're supposed to drain it every now and again so cruddo doesn't build up on the bottom, so forth. May not have to change the element, right? Because it's not on nearly as often. There is an air filter to change or replace. Joe, maybe you've got more thoughts on that. I know that's all the basics I know of. I don't know of refrigerant related maintenance.
Yeah, I have an air filter on mine that is it's cleanable. So you just, and the water heater tells you when it needs to be cleaned, and you just rinse it underwater and put it back. So nothing to buy or do. And I think it's only told me I've had to do that once since 2017. So that's the maintenance I've had so far.
Great. All right, I am gonna hold the rest of these questions to the end Q&A. We've just got one more panelist who's gonna speak. So it'll just be another 10 minutes until the full Q&A session here. And I'd like to introduce now our third and final panelist, Alexi Miller. Alexi is the Senior Project Manager and the Lead Engineer at New Buildings Institute. He has been working for more than a decade on advancing deep energy efficiency and low carbon outcomes in the built environment. Alexi leads several programs and initiatives at NBI, including Grid Optimal Buildings Initiative, which you'll hear about today, as well as the Getting to Zero Buildings database, which is the most comprehensive knowledge source on zero energy and zero carbon buildings across North America. Everybody, Alexi Miller.
Thank you. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, looks good.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. Well, thanks for joining. Good to be here. And this event was going to happen over at the Rogue Pilot Brewery in Northwest Portland. Obviously, very good reasons not to hold it there, but I went ahead and got myself a Rogue anyway. So when my throat gets dry, I've got something. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about heat pump water heaters and specifically how they can play an enabling role in helping us societally move toward a decarbonized, transformed energy system going forward. So I'm going to bring this out several steps way back out from the utility closet or the garage where that water heater might sit, all the way up to the grid scale and the societal carbon scale. And then I'll bring it back down in and talk about what this means for water heaters. So bear with me for a minute. Okay, so a couple of macro trends that are going on, a little glimpse of the future, right? At MBI, we do a lot. We're a 20-year-old nonprofit, I should say, based in Portland. I've been with MBI about 6 years. One of the things I do actually is I maintain a database tracking all the zero energy and zero carbon buildings, non-single family homes, multifamily and commercial, institutional, et cetera, across North America. There's about 650 of them. And we're seeing a lot of action, a lot of movement in the zero energy and zero carbon space. Was that Joe, I think, earlier, who mentioned, the energy systems, the electricity grid is decarbonizing, that's accelerating. We're also seeing moves toward building electrification, like switching from gas to electric in buildings, as well as vehicle electrification. We're seeing some cool stuff come in, energy storage. We're seeing a lot more attention paid to resiliency as well. So there's a paradigm shift going on in the grid. This is where we used to be, right? You turn the light on, you turn the switch on, the light comes on, you don't really think about it. And has basically been a one-way grid where you've got these thermal generating stations, these big central plants. They send the power to the transmission system. It goes to you. It's the U.S. electric grid has been called the most complicated machine ever built. So I can't call it simple. This diagram is simple. It's not, but that's how things have been, is really a one-way flow. What we've been seeing, and a couple places have seen this more than others, is things are starting to change. You get a lot more distributed generation. Power is now sometimes flowing back out of homes and buildings during some times, right? Those with solar energy, exporting it to the grid. This is great. It helps us get to our decarbonization goals. It just means we have a little bit more need for active grid management. And in some cases, the grid hasn't been ready for that. So utilities have had to kind of handle that. They're doing great. They're handling it well. But as we get more distributed energy, we got to think about that a little more, we being the people who manage the grid, whoever that is. Intelligent building operations and storage can help manage that, as can building technologies like heat pump water heaters, right? And then also, there's a need for a whole lot more interaction between buildings and the grid, between homes and the grid, as we move toward this future state, what we really want to get to, which has a decarbonized electricity system and smart buildings and resilient buildings, and it's affordable and it's safe, right? This is where we want to end up. There's no one way to get there. There are many, many different ways that we're going to get there. So there are a few different situations going on around the country in energy geek circles. I love geeking out about energy stuff. People talk about the duck curve in California, which basically means there's this belly of the duck hour. I won't get too deep into it, but it has to do with solar overgeneration during the middle of the day. A whole lot of solar, both utility and distributed, mostly large scale utility, but both definitely. Pushing electricity out during the middle of the day, 10 to 2 maybe, but the peak demand on the system is actually more like 6, 7, 8, 9 p.m. So the peak renewable coming in is not at the same time as the demand for the power coming out. And when you put those two things together, it pushes the middle of the day down, and it pushes the solar isn't helpful at that end peak time of the day, 7, 8, 9 p.m. Sun's going down, right? Without storage, it's hard to square that circle. But of course, storage is very expensive. So there's a lot of different strategies that we can do to get there. Batteries might be one way, but there are costs, both dollar and environmental costs, to just solving this by throwing a whole bunch of batteries at it. The point this slide is trying to make is that it's not all ducks across the entire country. Places with a whole lot of wind, for example, Texas, they got a lot of wind overnight. Solar during the day, wind overnight. That's great. There's just this little smidgen of time in the evening hours where it's unserved, and they say that looks like the ear of an armadillo sticking up. Okay, sure. There's different animals. I call this the grid menagerie, right? The situation is a lot of places are moving toward California, where there's more and more solar coming on. So there's this little bit of slack demand during the middle of the day. What that ends up doing, it drives something called curtailment, where there may be that solar coming on, but every now and then, this doesn't happen all year, just occasionally throughout the year, we don't have anything to do with it. We can't use it. So it gets turned off, which isn't the end of the world, but I would like our solar panels to be doing more than nothing, right? So basically we want to figure out ways to make buildings be more flexible in terms of how they use energy, to make sure that we can really use all that renewable energy, which is free and clean, to productive uses. One thing this trend ends up doing is it makes the carbon intensity of the grid vary over time. So this graph is showing the marginal carbon emissions on the California grid. This is 2017, actual 2017 data. Green is low carbon, gray is high carbon. And these are just normalized numbers, but this is all 8,760 hours of the year from 2017, and pretty clear trends, right? In the spring, when there's not a ton of heating or cooling, March, April especially, February, March, April, California, right? Not a ton of demand, quite a bit of solar, also hydro and wind producing a good amount right then. But when it comes summertime, you've got that high energy demand, air conditioning especially driven period during the summer afternoons, where the renewables can't keep up, so we're cranking a bunch of gas plants, so higher carbon then. As the grid evolves and we achieve success with our decarbonization goals, we are seeing this trend accelerate. This is the average predicted carbon intensity on the electricity grid over time. This happens to be Colorado. So before was California, this is Colorado. But you can kind of see what's going on, right? If you squint at this for a minute, in 2020, it's a little hard to tell. There is a pattern in there. By 2050, the pattern is very clear. And it's actually, Colorado's looking a little bit more like California, right? The middle of the day, things are cleaner, although maybe a little less clean in the summer afternoons, but there's enough renewables on the grid that they're really doing pretty well. That's the direction we're going, but we're not, these are predictions, right? This is alpha stage predicted data. So don't take it too seriously, but this gives you a basic idea of where we're pointing here. I actually wanted to put a shout out to this great organization called Watt Time. They're a nonprofit subsidiary of Rocky Mountain Institute, with whom we work pretty closely. They've put out this green index little web widget, and it shows the current marginal grid emissions intensity for your particular spot on a 1 to 100 scale. So it's normalized. This isn't pounds of carbon exactly, but it gives you a pretty good idea, right? Is this a good time to run my dishwasher, for example? general rule, probably 6, 7 p.m. is relatively dirty, but this is marginal carbon, which means if I had that extra kilowatt of energy or of demand on the grid, that extra kilowatt hour of energy being needed, where's it going to come from? Is someone going to turn up a gas plant? Or do we have more hydro in the dams that we can use to just put a little bit more water through and generate that power more cleanly, right? So marginal and carbon are marginal and average carbon are two different things. We can get into that later, or I'm happy to send some links along to explain that a little more. But in any case, this is kind of a neat little widget that I just wanted to throw in there. So as we move toward this decarbonized grid future, where there's a lot more renewables, there will be more intermittent renewables, more solar, more wind. This is a good thing. Like I said a bit ago, we can solve the problem of matching the time of supply to the time of demand by throwing a bunch of batteries at it. But I don't think that's really what we're going to do. It's very expensive and there's environmental costs. A better move, perhaps, or one of the solutions to this issue is going to be building modifications, changing when buildings demand energy from the grid. So that has to do with energy flexibility, that has to do with energy efficiency, that has to do with load shifting and other things along these lines. This graphic's from the US Department of Energy. So they have this kind of cool, or maybe it's kitschy, I don't know, I think it's fun. Shed, shimmy, shift, shape for these four. There are 4 ways you could do this. You can turn off your lights during the peak. That's load shed. You just turn the energy off. You don't get it back. It's just you're not using as much right that minute. You could shift it. Maybe that's what a battery might do, or some other energy flexibility technology, right? Maybe you preheat it a little earlier so you don't need to heat later. Or you are just more efficient in general. I'm not going to get into the modulate piece, which is very, very short timescales. It's not that big a deal for us regular folks, I think. So there are 4 basic categories that I think of for how buildings can help crack this nut, this grid decarbonization challenge that's created when we now have a lot of renewables on the grid. It's a good problem to have. We want to have this problem more, but it's still something we got to solve. There's permanent efficiency, right? If you're more efficient, you use less energy at peak times as well as all the other times. Great, nicely done. There's load shifting, as I mentioned, modifying the time of use. There's energy flexibility in a building where a building could say actively, I am going to run my dishwasher later. I'm going to hit the delay button for 6 hours. Or there's dispatchable energy flexibility where maybe there's a connection to the grid or a third party operator or organization that can say, hey, don't run that dishwasher quite yet. This is not a great time to do it. We'll do it in 2 hours, and that takes some controls and some algorithms, right? Enabling technologies are critical. Smart building technologies and the ability to bring this flexibility into the building is really a key piece to getting there as a whole society. Like I keep saying, you can do this with batteries, but maybe we can do this with water heaters. Can we use water heaters as batteries? So I think of heat pump water heaters as having this trifecta of benefits. 1, energy efficiency. They're far more efficient than their baseline, whether that's electric or gas. I have 2 to 3 times more efficient than electric. Other places will say 3 or 4. Regardless, it's a lot. And it, maybe a little more in relatively moderate climate, maybe a little less in a very cold climate if it's ducted from the outside, but they're quite efficient. 2, it's an opportunity to go from burning fossil fuels in the building to using electricity, which, as I've said, is getting cleaner and cleaner. And then 3 gets to kind of what I've been talking about, this enhanced building grid integration. Heat pump water heaters are a great opportunity to bring in these smart controls, to bring in energy flexibility. And of course, they are energy storage. I mean, what is a water heater if not energy storage? You're heating it up so you can use it, and it's sitting there in a tank being stored. So that's a great opportunity to then tap that ability to have that energy stored up for grid management, for carbon reduction. And of course, they're just less peaky, right? They use less energy when they're on. So that's helpful when you're in a peak situation where energy is dirty and expensive. This is a cool graphic from an article by Pierre Delforge, who is with Natural Resources Defense Council. It's awesome. The link's down there in the presentation. But basically, he's talking about how you can use a heat pump water heater as a clean energy battery. In some of those charts, like the duck curve, I mentioned that the dirtiest and most expensive time for the society in general, for grid electricity, is in that evening hour in most of the year, most places, most of the year. And a heat pump water heater can be programmed to limit its energy use during those evening hours by preheating its water. And it's doing so in a very efficient way. So you've got the opportunity to not only use the energy when it's not in peak, but also if you have solar on your house, you may be able to use the solar energy that you are producing yourself, not having to export as much to the grid, making sure that you're staying within your net metering, for example, might get a tariff benefit from that if you've got a big system. And then you're using your own clean energy to be able to coast through that really dirty time on the grid when, especially if that's soon after the solar, the sun's gone down and your panels aren't producing as much. So that's kind of the basic idea of why I think heat pump water heaters are a grid enabling technology, right? You've got this, I'm gonna go back to, for one moment, this trifecta of benefits. They're efficient, they're a decarbonization strategy, and they're a smart appliance that offers this enhanced flexibility opportunity. Someone mentioned earlier, hey, what about refrigerants? So I'll take a minute to talk about refrigerants because it is a heat pump. It gets its efficiency from moving heat from A to B, from outside to inside, or outside air to the water in this case. And it does that with a refrigerant. So right now there are basically three options in heat pump water heaters. There's the conventional, which is usually R410A. It's an HFO. Don't make me spell it out. I'll send it in tag. I'll look it up and send it in the chat. There's a lower GWP option, R134A, and then there's the very, very low GWP option, carbon dioxide. GWP stands for global warming potential. That is to say, if you took one molecule of this stuff, this Freon is a refrigerant, right? That's a HCFC. If you took one molecule of the chemical and threw it out in the atmosphere, the global warming potential means over 100 years, how many times worse than carbon dioxide is it in terms of global warming? Or how much better is it at being a greenhouse gas, which is something we don't want. R410A is about 2,000 times better than carbon dioxide. R134A, which is a somewhat lower option, is about 1,400 times better. Carbon dioxide is exactly as impactful as carbon dioxide. But one note, there's only one product from Sandon on the market that uses CO2 as a refrigerant. It's pretty expensive. It's pretty cool, but it's pretty expensive. So, these are big numbers, right? 2,000 times more than CO2, that seems big. So let's see what that means. I did this little back of the envelope estimate. These are rough numbers, so don't take them too seriously. This gives you an idea of the scale of the question. Don't hold me to the exact numbers here, all right? But let's say the standard unit has 22 ounces of refrigerant. I was kind of having a hard time figuring out exactly how much is in some of the other ones. I suspect it's significantly less because the standard unit is actually split. The condenser goes outside and the water heater's inside. But conservative assumption, let's say it's 22 ounces. Leakage rates I looked up for heat pumps are about 3.5% a year. It's probably quite a bit less for a packaged unit, but again, we're going conservative. This is an outside estimate, back of the envelope thing. Let's say it's around for 15 years. I calculated that out. That means we're going to lose about 1/2 pound of refrigerant over the unit's lifetime. Things leak. The entropy is unstoppable, right? You can't get away from it. In that time, the grid's going to go from about 25% renewables to about 50% renewables, so about 15% cleaner electricity supply. So then what do we see when we run these numbers? Well, how much energy does each option use and how much carbon dioxide comes out of it? The baseline electric up in the upper left there, I pulled these numbers from Energy Star, about 5,000 kilowatt hours a year for an electric water heater, or 250 therms a year for a gas water heater. So here's some CO2 equivalencies, a little under 3,000 pounds a year for those. This is the average over the 15-year measure life. A heat pump water heater is more like 2,000 kilowatt hours a year, or about 1,000 pounds of carbon a year. If you tally that up over the lifetime, on the top row is the operational CO2. That's the energy that, you use enough energy over 15 years to make up 40,000 pounds of CO2 in the electric case, or 44 in the gas, or about 16, 17,000 in the heat pump case. That half a pound of refrigerant that leaked out, here's the global warming potential over the 100-year lifespan of conventional lower GWP and CO2. So it's about a 60% savings, which is what's shown here. Basically, this says to me that the refrigerant issue is not nothing, but it shouldn't be holding you back from going and getting a heat pump water heater. If what you're worried about is the global warming potential of the refrigerants, the savings are far bigger. So there's that little back of the envelope number, and I know I think it was Kyle from Energy Trust with it, said NIA's rough estimate was about 1 ton of carbon a year saved. Again, rough estimate, basic idea, but it's pretty similar to this, right? This is not too far off from that number. So it gives me some confidence that it's at least decent, that we can say with some confidence that the carbon savings from getting one of these is far, far greater than the refrigerant in the thing. And I just wanted to mention as well, one of the reasons I like talking about this building grid integration stuff, I don't know if it's one of the reasons I like to, it's a good thing I like talking about building grid integration because I do it a lot. I'm leading up the Grid Optimal Buildings Initiative, which is a multi-stakeholder effort to improve building grid integration. And we're about 1.5 years into a 3-year initiative, coming out with some cool stuff. We've got a few webinars recorded on demand. We'll be coming out with some more, and we're working on several different ways, from utility programs like Energy Trust, although this is in development, right? We're a ways away from getting there yet, but working with utilities, with other organizations, to ways to enhance building grid integration across all of our society. So with that, I will say thank you. My email is there, and I think there are quite a few questions in the Q&A, so maybe we can open it up and have a little open conversation. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alexi. And thank you to all of our panelists, Joe and Gregor as well. I learned a lot from watching this, and I already knew a little bit about heat pump water heaters. So thanks for being here. And thank you so much to all our participants who joined us tonight. I saw at the peak we had about 77. We're still hovering around 70. So I hope you stay on for the Q&A. If you asked a question, or if you're interested in hearing the answers to some of the other questions. But we will be going through and trying to answer all these questions in the time that we have. So I'm gonna, there's a couple clarifying questions for you, Alexi.
Sure.
And we can start off with those, then I'm gonna start back towards the top of the queue again. So one of them should be a pretty easy question, is, was that rad photo at the start of Alexi's presentation taken in Wakanda?
Oh yeah, that was Wakanda. Yep. Yes, the transformation from building the Hoover Dam to Wakanda.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll get there someday.
Great. All right.
Actually, it's kind of neat that when they made that movie, the movie makers consulted with some pretty heavy-hitting architects. I believe Zaha Hadid was one of them. So they really did think about the architecture of the buildings and the urban planning, layout of the city of Wakanda. It's just kind of a neat example.
Cool. I'll have to go sometime. All right. So our next question is back up to the top. Do they have plenty of capacity? These are heat pump water heaters. Do they have plenty of capacity for a multifamily building, apartment buildings, office buildings? Are there good incentives for larger buildings? to get off gas from water heaters. So this is a multi-part. Is it good for larger buildings? Does it have the capacity? And then also, are there incentives? So maybe Gregor, you might know about incentives from Energy Trust.
Well, I would say for each model, I have that sheet that I suggested people refer to on the website, and it'll say how many the maximum recommended household size would be for each of the models. So there wouldn't be one that would, and correct me if I'm wrong, gentlemen on the panel, but one that could support a multifamily unit. There are multifamily incentives available. It's a whole other department away from residential, and there are incentives available for all manner of means, not just heat pump water heaters, through the multifamily department, and I can certainly put you in touch with that group as well.
Also, I was just having a conversation with David Heslem, the executive director of Earth Advantage, and he was saying we're a couple years whole multifamily unit heat pump water heaters that can service a bunch of different apartments. He said we're getting there, we're getting close. This was just a conversation last week. Right now, the thought is that you'd have to have the individual units. So that came up in a conversation recently. So hopefully we're getting there, and we'll be there soon.
Great.
Yeah, I can chime in too. Some of my colleagues at New Buildings Institute are leading another initiative. I've been talking about the Grid Optimal Buildings Initiative, but there's a lot of initiatives we're working on. One of them is called the Advanced Water Heating Initiative, and it's a consortium of manufacturers and utilities and other organizations working to advance heat pump water heaters and other, really that's the big one, right? Advanced water heating. So there are a couple of big categories that are being developed right now. One of them is those central heat pump water heater systems that would be good for large multifamily or institutional or larger buildings, right? That have those central systems with recirculation loops. I would agree that they're not quite there yet. I agree with David and Joe on that. They're coming, they're in development. There's some pilots and stuff like that. Not huge mass market. Not you can't go to Home Depot like you can and buy one of those, although it's a different product stream, all that, right? But still, not quite the same stage of deployment. The other exciting thing that is being progressed through Advanced Water Heating Initiative and some other work as well is a 120 volt heat pump hot water heater, which would be really great for retrofit applications in homes that you don't have that 240 volt wiring. If you're going from a gas to an electric water heater, especially multifamily, this is an issue. There may be lots of water heaters throughout the apartment building, but not the wiring to support moving them all to 240 volt heat pump hot water heaters. Those are also a few years away, but manufacturers are making progress. Awesome. There was one or two other questions in there. I'm not sure I recall.
I think that's basically it. It's generally a capacity question and also incentive. But I think that's good information for multifamily interested folks. Our next question here is about venting. Does it make sense to vent outside so as not to cool local space?
Yes. Especially if you have it in an indoor application. Yeah.
Is that the only way you would do it then?
I saw some stuff online where people still vented it in their indoors and cooled their closet, and they tried to air seal that closet off. Yeah, but I think if it's indoors, generally it's a great idea to vent it outside. And yeah.
Sounds like a great idea.
I mean, yeah, it's Solar Oregon, right? This isn't Phoenix, Arizona, so we do have a significant amount of heating load.
Yeah. All right. I think we may have answered this one previously. What is the brand model, Joe, of the one that does both domestic and radiant hydronic, and who installed it?
It's just a normal water heater. It's a Rheem Performance hybrid hot water heater. I'll put a link in the chat room shortly to that. We just hooked it up to a hydronic heating system. So before we just set our hydronic heating system to run off our hot water heater instead of a boiler. So
great. And you did that yourself, or?
Oh yeah, right. I did it. I did all the research myself, and then hired a just kind of a normal contractor who had never put them in, and we kind of troubleshot it together. It was very similar to putting in a regular hot water heater, except for the venting part. But these tutorials that Nia has created with Energy Trust are just going to make your life so much easier. And then you can always just ask a trade ally to do that. But yeah, I researched it myself and used a contractor.
Great, thanks. Next question is, how did you close up the vent through the roof when you removed the gas flue, and what did it cost? I think that's for you again, Joe.
We connected, I'm trying to think. That's a good question. We might have connected the heat pump or water heater to the gas flue. That's jogging my memory. It was 2 years ago, and I can't exactly remember what we did for that. I apologize.
Great question, Nancy. We can hopefully answer that.
Tell me.
Yeah, through email, if you want to email info at
if you want to email me at Joe at Solar Oregon, I can go check it out and see what we did. I can't remember.
Yeah, great. Next question we have is, in a conditioned space, such as a bathroom, how drastic is the warm air loss?
I can speak from experience. Mine pulls warm air from the attic, so it doesn't. I assume the question is, if you don't duct it, how drastic is the warm air loss? And Alexi and Gregor, do you guys have any data on the exact loss in temperature of, if you have it in, I think a couple degrees is reasonable. It depends on how small the space is. It's a bathroom, so it might cool it significantly if it's not a big open space. Indoor is always a great idea to duct it if you can.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay. Great. Our next question here says, I'm interested in heating the floor slab with the heat pump water heater. I've read you can't do that. The heat pump isn't durable enough to last long. Have you heard that? I have hot water ceiling panels that I could use to heat pump hot water heater for. Do you think that would work?
Well, I'm doing it, and hopefully it does not reduce the lifespan of my water heater. And I haven't had any complaints in a year and a half. I don't know whether you could use it for. See, I think any application, we were running the hydronic floor on a gas hot water heater before, and any application that a gas or an electric hot water heater could be used for, a heat pump hot water heater can be used for. I think I read it as well that you can't hook up a radiant system to a water heater, and then I was excited to prove that false.
Great. And Joe, one more clarifying question here. What is the gallon capacity in your home water heater?
Right, I got two 50-gallon water heaters. Yeah.
Great. Another question here. We have a 6-year-old electric hot water heater powered by solar. Given issues of the embodied energy of this appliance and recycling issues, should we keep the current heater or replace now? How would we recycle?
The recycling part's easy. You can take it to a metal recycler. I did that with my old water heaters. As far as the embodied energy, there might be some calculations in there. You're going to save a lot of carbon dioxide per year by switching over to heat pump. So I imagine it would pay off pretty quickly for you to do it, and it might be a good idea. It's another example of stranded assets. You don't get the full life out of what you invested in. Alexi or Gregor, do you guys have anything else to add to that? whether switch now or hold off. Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, if you can use, some general ideas of how much carbon you save per year that Alexi was showing, um, and then kind of calculate what it went to make into the. It's kind of a tough choice facing us all. Some people say, "Oh, I want my car to drive until it dies." I'm always a fan of replacing and getting cleaner sooner. And recycling the other stuff. I mean, there's other extraneous benefits. You're helping the market grow. You're telling your friends and neighbors about heat pump or water heaters, and so there's additional benefits as well to switching sooner.
Great. Are there other incentives besides Energy Trust of Oregon?
Your local utility almost always has some incentives, perhaps through the state as well, or the Department of Energy. I don't know if they have them specifically for heat pump water heaters, but you should definitely make sure to check those vehicles out.
I know Portland General Electric was running a pilot program. I say was because I don't know off the top of my head if it's still going. But this kind of gets to two different program or questions, or maybe they were running a pilot program to test using heat pump water heaters as clean energy batteries with a grid integration and grid control strategy. And they had these little controllers in there. It was CTA 2045 is the spec, which is to say it's kind of like Ethernet, right? It's a standard USB. And so a CTA 2045 compatible controller had to be on there. And if it is, then you get an extra incentive to buy the thing, assuming that you agree to participate in their program, where every now and then they send an automated signal and say, hey, now's a good time to either preheat or not heat, coast for a little while, to be able to ride through some peak periods, some dirty and expensive times for the grid. I know that program was running for a few years. I don't know off the top of my head if it's running right now. It may be that they wrapped up their pilot. They had pretty good results, so I would suspect if it has ended as a pilot, they'll be seriously considering bringing it back as a full-on program, or maybe it's still going. But Great. It's pretty cool to see. Portland General was one of the first to really try to go big on piloting this thing.
Yeah, that's great. Good demand response focus there.
And one cool thing about heat pump hot water heaters is that they're often built with that capability already there. It's worth checking if you're going to get one. It's worth checking to see if it can do that that kind of demand response stuff, just so that by the time the utility does roll out a full program, you're ready to play.
Great. And that answers our next question, which is, are heat pump water heaters demand response compatible? An answer, a resounding yes.
CTA 2045. Letters and numbers, right? That's what it's all about.
Yeah, future proof. All right, our next question here is, do all heat pump water heaters work for radiant floor heat? And it sounds like this has been advised against by some online resources, though we know from experience that Joe has done it and it works well. Any other notes there, Joe?
I would say go to the Energy Trust website, contact a trade ally. In my experience, it's worked well. I was a little bit bold and just went for it, but contact a trade ally and people who've put in heat pump or water heaters and ask them their opinion on the radiant floor. Yeah, and how big your radiant floor is, I think it just they'll be able to help you guide you in that journey.
Great. All right. A couple of these questions are a little long, so I'm going to save them for the end. Will you make this presentation available on Solar Oregon website? And I can answer that we are recording the webinar, and we'll make it available definitely through our newsletter. And I think we should be able to make it available on our website too. So you can take a look for that.
And we'll also send it out to everyone who signed up on Eventbrite as well.
Another question here. how can a heat pump water heater be programmed to run during the certain times of the day, for example, afternoon?
I don't believe mine has the capability of doing this yet. Alexi, have you seen any of the programmability?
Do you mean like, can you program it as opposed to participate in a utility program? Just set it up to do that on its own?
Yeah,
I don't know.
that's a good question. Yeah, I'm not sure that they are smart. I just haven't done that to mine, so I'm not sure if that. But with the smart technology, you would think that that would be a function that is either coming or is already here.
So I mentioned watt time at one point. They have that marginal carbon data. They have that little widget, the green index. Their purpose is to provide this real-time marginal carbon data stream that can then be baked into controls of devices. So they're working with some manufacturers to try to get the ability for appliances, water heaters, and others to control based on real-time marginal carbon from that data set. But I don't think it's in a water heater yet. So it's probably going to come at some point, but you know, hopefully before we all live in Wakanda.
Great.
And the exciting thing, I'll just say real quick, is that another great aspect of heat pump water heaters is you take a shower in the morning, and then the heat pump works for an hour or two. It depends how long your shower was, 3 hours. You know, when demand is less on the grid, so it keeps your water for a longer period. So like Alexi said, you avoid those peak times where you're using a ton of energy, and it kind of sips energy over a longer period of time, which is better.
Great. Do you know of any PGE rep that can talk about adding peak shaving power generation from my home? I think this is a question again about the demand response. Do we have any specific people that we can recommend that folks talk to? Maybe a good thing would be to call PGE and see if there's any resources they can provide to you. Any recommendations you guys have?
I just know that PGE have an opt-in program for single-family residentials that you can go onto your account and say that you'll participate in demand response programs so that you can, you know, avoid running dishwashers, having hot showers at peak times of the day, and you'll be you'll get a kickback on that. I know that that's available for single-family.
Great.
Yeah.
Next. Oh, sorry. Were you going to add something, Alexi?
No, just agreeing. I thought I was on mute.
Okay. This next question is, what is the typical low limit environmental operating range of a heat pump water heater if in an unheated space such as a garage or attic? This is testing our, some trivia, some heat pump water heater technical trivia for our panelists.
Can you say that first part, the low limit what?
So the question is, what's the lowest operating temperature in terms of the space that this unit can be in for it to operate well if it's in an unheated space such as a garage or an attic?
I don't think it's anything we have to worry about in the Northwest. I mean, this might be more pertinent question in the colder parts of the country, but heat pumps I think are great here, regardless of how cold it gets in Oregon. And there's always the electric backup if for some reason you got to some ridiculously cold temperature. But again, we've used ours through multiple winters exclusively in heat pump mode, and it's never been a problem, as well as my heat pump heating system. So.
Yeah, so remember the heat pump is like 300% efficient, right? Or maybe more. Let's say it's 300% efficient. It's gonna get less efficient and have less capacity as the outside air gets colder and colder. So it's gonna, in 300% efficient might be at, I don't know, 45, 50 degrees outside, right? Regular temperatures for Oregon. It's gonna stay really efficient, pretty close to that 300% as it gets colder. By the time you get down to like 0 degrees Fahrenheit, which is never really happens here, that's when you'd get down so low that the heat pump would only be operating at maybe slightly more than 100% efficient, and it wouldn't be cranking out very much heat. So it would just go to resistance heat anyway. It would do that backup, like Joe said. So basically here in Oregon, that's not an issue.
Great. I did hear anecdotally once that they can be used in the subarctic and still pull heat out of very, very cold air. That is purely anecdotal, though.
And remember, you're talking about putting it in a garage or maybe an attic. It's not a. They don't typically go outside, right? This is going in what you might call a semi-conditioned space. It's not a conditioned space, but the garage does not get as cold as the outdoors, even out in Bend in the middle of the winter. So you're still not dealing with outside air temperature it's vented, but the unit itself is in there. So anyway, if that's a big concern, like Joe, he's pulling it out of the attic, and I bet his attic is not quite as cold as the outside air and in the very coldest time of the year.
Great. All right, our next question. What's the best way to dispose of heat pump water heaters, again, with refrigerants and greenhouse gases in mind?
It's a good question because they're relatively new that I don't think, just like electric vehicles, we're not seeing much demand for disposal yet. We were talking about this ahead of time, Alexi. Any thoughts on disposal?
I don't know, but I'm sure there's the right way to do it and the wrong way.
Yeah, I think because it's so new, I haven't heard too many people get them yet. But metro, regional government, or like the local government in your area, will be able to point you in the right direction for sure. You can I think they have search engines that you just type in what you're trying to get rid of, and it gives you the best option.
Yeah, heat pump water heaters are new, but air conditioners are not new.
Right.
And the problem of disposing of refrigerants, I don't personally know, but I'm sure that there's a hazardous waste option in most jurisdictions.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Metro has the hazardous waste. If you go,
Yeah, exactly.
Dispose of it.
Yeah, exactly. It's don't just shoot it with a rifle and throw it off the side of your truck out in the woods, okay?
Please. All right, our next question. Who installed Joe's ADU heat pump, and do you need a special model to handle both domestic and radiant hydronic? I think we've answered that, so I'm going to go ahead and skip that one. Thank you, Aaron Stevens. Just some praise for the webinar. We have a question here. I have a GE, and I'm wondering if it is not working as efficiently due to more power use this year versus last. Is there any way to check on the charge level somehow? Also, how likely is it for my GE to have a problem?
That's a good. We were hoping to get an installer on the webinar, and we're going to do future education for some of these specific technical questions that are a little bit outside our league. I would say that's an installer question is probably best about checking the levels of refrigerant.
Yeah, so again, you can go to energytrustoforegon.org website, and that's a great way to find installers to contact. We have a question asking about the best brands, though we are brand neutral at Solar Oregon, so I'm going to go ahead and skip that one, even if our panelists do have opinions, just because that's...
Yeah, I'm also brand neutral, but I did just post on the chat that the link to the product list that I was talking about earlier.
Oh, great. Yeah, so anybody who wants to take a look at some products can go in the chat.
I think we're getting close to the end here. Zach, maybe a couple more.
Yeah, we'll take just it looks like we might just have a couple more that are actually questions. Anyway, could someone compare the efficiency of air to water versus water to water, and in parentheses, geothermal, being water to water?
That's efficiencies I don't know. I'm sure cost. One of the benefits of the heat pump water heaters that we're talking about here, these air source ones, is just cost is significantly less than the geothermal.
Yeah, one of them you can go buy off the shelf at a hardware store. The other one probably not, and it's going to cost a lot more. So I'm sure there's a difference, but it's a totally different kind of unit.
Yeah, good question.
Plug and play.
But maybe check with a geothermal installer.
Yeah.
And we can say, I'll do 2 more questions here. This one, if you do duct it, you still get a loss, right?
Maybe they're thinking some of the, because when you duct heat in your house, you have a loss. I don't believe there's much loss if you're ducting from the attic. Alex, do you have any opinions on that, or Gregor?
Be an installer question, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
Mm.
I would be. I mean, my ducting is really pretty minimal. So maybe there's a little extra energy in pushing that air out, but it's not very much. It's directly from my attic and then out. So I imagine it wouldn't be much of a loss.
Okay. And here's an interesting question for the last question of the evening. Are there water coupled heat pump hot water heaters, like for a floating home? That's an interesting question. I'm not sure I can picture that. Might need a diagram there for me. Does anybody have a good answer for that?
Yeah, I don't know what the water coupled part means.
Okay. All right. Well, that's our last question. Apologies if we didn't get to your questions. We still have 24 open questions. Looks like the majority of them are mostly comments. But I know that there are some questions we didn't get to. If you do have questions, a great resource, again, is getting in touch with Energy Trust of Oregon referred contractors and talking directly to a contractor, especially if you have a technical question. They'll be able to answer any of your technical questions really easily. If you have a question for us about our webinar, feel free to get in touch with us at info@solaroregon.org. I'll put that in the chat one last time. Again, huge thanks to everybody who joined us and to our panelists. I hope that everybody's staying healthy, managing to get out and enjoy some fresh air if you're able. And I hope that you have a good week and join us for our next webinar on solar plus electric vehicles.
Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Good night.